Oh, it's on. Okay, hi. My name's Hamill. I'm a solution architect with Kainos, and I'm a bit of a strategy skeptic, I guess. Stuff other than tech that really interests me is understanding why we solve the problems we are, why we're doing them in a certain way. So I'm really interested in the kind of, not just the how, but the why we do things in the organization and for the customers we work with. And I want to talk a bit about Wardley Mapping, which is an approach to trying to understand how you're making some of the choices you're making in your strategy and how you tie them back to user needs. So basically what I would like to know in general is, how does an organization create its strategy? How do you make the decisions that you've made? Why have you picked these things? So you're going for AI, you're going for machine learning, you're going for all the other things that sound really interesting and you hear at conferences. But why specifically have we made those choices? Can you show you're working out? So I kind of find that a little hard to dig into sometimes. And maybe it's just me personally, but I hope other people find that it seems that kind of a lot of the time strategy seems to just come out of somewhere and it sounds good and we go with it. And I'm interested in how we kind of make it a bit more concrete. So little bit of skepticism there, how it's made, business, technology, strategy. There's a bit of following what other people are doing, copying your competitors. There's a bit of magic quadrant, so bring some consultants in and they can think for us. There's Hippo, highest paid person's opinion. It's always good for your career to follow that kind of strategy. And then there's fear of missing out as well. And what it means is that it's kind of hard to identify how we're meeting particular user needs or maybe why we've made the decisions that we've made, and then how you can communicate that to the people that you work with to get them kind of bought in. So you're probably familiar with a Swot analysis. Put your hand up if you've seen one of these before. Awesome. It's pretty common, but the problems I think that you find with it are it doesn't really show user needs. It more kind of shows this is maybe why we've picked a thing that we're going to actually do, not so much what's the goal and what are our options, what does the kind of landscape look like. And it kind of means that you can end up with one of these reverse engineered to justify whatever decision you actually wanted all along. So you can end up with something like this coming out of your SWOT analysis. Turns out our strategy is blockchain. Cool. So I think it really helps people to understand why that we're doing things when they can see how we're meeting user needs and how we actually got to the decisions that we got to, rather than something just kind of coming down from on high. And there's a lot of talk about user research in the talks before. It's really good to see people actually tying those into how we're meeting a specific person's need or how we're kind of solving a problem that exists in society, which is really good. So I'm really interested in seeing how we got from we should build a blockchain to that user need. And Wardley maps are a technique that a guy called Simon Wardley has invented to basically describe how you can meet a particular user need and visualize the types of components that you've got that meet that user need in your business, in your plan, and what kind of position they have in the kind of technology landscape. So the purpose of that is to help illustrate the why and the how. Why are we particularly picking this particular cloud service? Why are we going to buy this thing rather than building it? And what's the purpose that we're trying to actually achieve that specifically these actions can actually be tied back to? And it helps really show people in the organization as well why we're doing a thing rather than just telling them, here's what you're doing. And you can use Wardley maps at very different levels. So you can kind of have this as a CEO. You can use a Wardley map for your business and decide, well, this based on these parts of the landscape and the user needs that we're meeting, we should buy this competitor. We should open our API as an open platform and leave the hardware behind. Or you can use them at a lower level and talk about some of the decisions that you've made in particular projects. So I'm going to use an example from a project that I've worked on at a little bit of a lower level. And specifically, a Wardley map wants to show the components that you have actually selected or that you're going to implement to meet that user need, the state of the maturity in terms of the evolution of that technology, and the opportunities you have to change some of those things and maybe how they will change over time. So this is a Wardley map. Don't worry about reading it right now. I'm just going to walk you through it. And this is the way of demonstrating how these particular components meet a user need. And on the dimensional axis, we've got the evolution of those things in the kind of technology industry. So how did we get here? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to start with user needs. You have to start with user needs. There's no point in doing something if it doesn't meet a user need. If you're a private company, your private company is presumably selling someone something or you want people to subscribe to your service. that's a user need you have to fulfill. If you're a public sector organization, you're meeting some sort of societal need that's actually for the public. So if you don't start with user needs, it's really hard to keep track on why you're doing something. So in this specific example, I work with a customer who has loads and loads of feedback all the time from one of the services that they run. And they get so much user feedback that it's basically impossible for people to actually read, as much as they like getting user feedback. And if they get thousands of these things every week, it's not feasible for someone to have to sit down and read through a big Excel spreadsheet, which is the kind of current process. And what they wanted was a means of trying to find out a little bit more about what are the really good things and what are the really bad things that are coming out of user feedback, and trying to get a bit more of this kind of signal to noise. So assuming you've then sat down and you've had a discussion with the business people and you've maybe proposed this technical solution, in this case, it was suggested maybe we want to mine the feedback from this survey data using something like SurveyMonkey or Smart Survey, and we're going to pull all the data out of that and put it into this containerized Python app. It has to be containerized because we want our devs to work on it. And it's a Python app because we want to integrate with a nice NLP library that we found. And we're going to do some sentiment analysis off the top of that to find what are the good parts that we should praise people for and do more of, and what are the bad parts we want to change in the service. So for that proposal, for the things that we think we might want to do, we want to break that down into a chain of what are the things that we actually need to meet that user need, and show how they kind of interact and how they depend on each other. So how do you get from, I want to understand a bit more about my survey feedback down to, containers, for example. So in this case, we've got a survey platform, which is Smart Survey or SurveyMonkey. You've got the thing that we're proposing we want to build, which is processing that feedback. We want to store some of the data out of the actual survey platform. We want to do sentiment analysis on it. That's the part that we're really interested in at this point. And because we're doing sentiment analysis, then we have to do these other things. So we want to create this NLP app. We want to run it on some sort of compute platform. We want that to be cluster orchestrated because we're going to run containers in production. And obviously those things depend on worker nodes and maybe in a very specific example, Kubernetes. And that's just to break down the things that we think we need to do to meet that user need. And we're only going to go as far down as virtual machines. We're not going to talk about like servers and electricity and stuff like that, because as far as we're concerned, it's sufficiently commoditized that other people will handle it for us. So the next thing to do, once you've understood your user need and broken it down into some things that you think fulfill that user need, is to try and estimate the maturity of those components in terms of technology evolution. So the one constant in the industry is that things that are newly invented will move from an innovation to a commodity. Mobile phones used to be a thing that somebody had in a lab as an experiment, and now, on average, people have more than one mobile phone. So we want to know where do those things sit in the landscape, because that might influence whether or not we think we want to build something, or maybe something we want to take advantage of. And we split the axis for the map into these sections. So Genesis is that's the area where you've just invented something. It's pure innovation. It's maybe a thing that's never been done before. Maybe it's a thing that's never been done before in that industry. It's something that's coming out of research and design. It's a user need that's unfulfilled, and we're going to do something different that hasn't been done to meet it. And in the custom build section, we've got stuff that is things that are specific to our users' needs that we're maybe doing for the first time in their industry. Maybe we're automating a process that already exists but hasn't been automated before. These are things that are specific to the problem that we're trying to solve, but it's not being newly invented for the very first time. And things in product and rental is when you can pick up stuff that people have already created. This is custom off-the-shelf software. This is open source libraries. This is Asterisk as a service. This is when some of these things that you're going to depend on are already out there, and what you need to do is plug them together and understand in what way to compose these things to meet that user need. And then finally, in commodity or utility, we've got things that are completely commoditized that you essentially don't have to care about. So you could think about things like electricity or an internet connection. Few companies would go out and have an open procurement for their electricity supplier. You just get the cheapest electricity supplier that's nearby. You know exactly what you're getting. You're getting 230 volts or whatever, and you get these plugs, and there's no custom things involved. It's purely standard. You don't have to think about it. You've probably never thought about it in your projects where you're actually developing things for your customer. So projecting the chain that we have of those particular components onto the Wardley map shows us where some of those things live in terms of the evolution. So we've got things like, obviously linking back to our user needs at the top, we've got the survey platform, which we're going to outsource. We're going to let, say, SurveyMonkey do that for us. we want to create the feedback processing service. That's the thing that's specific to our customers' needs. And then underneath that, then you drill down into all the little bits that we've decided we have to do, and where do they fit and where do they depend on each other. So for example, data storage is pretty commoditized. You can use Google Storage Platform, you can use Azure Blob Storage. Natural language processing, we're going to use Python NLP library, but there are opportunities for using other things that might become more commoditized. And then underneath that, there's a compute platform, which is where things, you just need something to run your application in the cloud, which is getting increasingly more commoditized. We're doing a little bit of work here in the Kubernetes master because it's kind of interesting new technology that maybe that's custom work that we have to do because of the specific kind of use case for that product. And that's maybe something we might want to avoid in the future. So when you're using the map, one of the things that you can do then, now that you've broken it up into this chain and you can see roughly where it sits in terms of the components, you could try and identify potential future changes. So like I said, one of the few constants in the industry is the evolution of these types of technology. Somebody's going to come along and commoditize this. Somebody's going to come along and do a thing that you're doing custom as a service for other people. So for example, the natural language processing, we're going to use a Python NLP library. There's now a Google Cloud NLP API that you can use as a service. You ship it text, and it'll ship you results back about entities and things that exist in that text. So you don't actually need, if your use case fits it, to have a great deal of understanding about the nuts and bolts of how NLP actually works. You just use it. There's certainly other options there. For example, we're doing a bunch of custom work that's quite far down the chain, which means it's not really close to the user's need. I mean, a user has never come to me and said, I want Kubernetes. They don't care about that. We might care about that because we have to do it to meet a user need. But in this case, we're doing a bunch of work that's maybe quite customized. We're having to configure things specifically. And there's definitely an opportunity to take advantage of the evolution in that particular technology. So Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and DigitalOcean are all offering Kubernetes as a service. So you can just throw containers at it, and then they will run it for you. You don't need to necessarily know the nuts and bolts of Kubernetes. You can focus on more important work further up the chain. And likewise, cluster orchestration, the whole thing is moving to the right. That's being commoditized entirely. If you look at services that are like platform as a service, or even if you really want to stick to containers, you can talk about AWS Fargate, where you can basically give them containers, throw money at it, and they will run your app, and you don't need to care about things like how many nodes do I have in these different zones. So it gives you an opportunity to take advantage of that and kind of build more value higher up. You can also identify inertia in some of these changes and potential future accelerators as well. So for example, for an inertia, let's say you've invested quite heavily in your organization in cluster orchestration. You know, you've got a team of people who are experts in container management. They've got loads of expertise now in Kubernetes. We've invested in training. We've invested in sending them to conferences and getting their certifications, and we've given that team representation at executive level. If you come along and you say to them, we want to use this container thing as a service because it'll let us focus more on the user needs and we don't have to worry about the lower level thing, you can expect resistance from that part of the organization. There are often things that you can say, this is an opportunity for this component to become more commoditized, and we want to take advantage of it. There will be things, or organizational things, there will be things in the environment. There might be legislation that stops you doing particular things. So you can use this as an opportunity to identify what kind of things might block us taking advantage of those changes. And then you can actually have discussions about that. And in terms of identifying future accelerators, you can have things in the map that change the whole structure that really completely obviate underlying components. So for example, sentiment analysis, this is the thing we kind of really want to do to the feedback that we're getting out of these surveys. We don't really want to manage worker nodes, we want to do sentiment analysis. So when Google Cloud Platform release sentiment analysis API in their NLP API, and Amazon Comprehend releases sentiment analysis as a service, you can take advantage of that and you can say, right, the whole of sentiment analysis is going to be essentially outsourced. Someone else is going to do it. It's going to be a commodity. I'm going to put money and text in and I get sentiment out and I don't really care how it happens. So long as that meets your use case, that might be a better use of your time and the customer's time and your money to do that. And you can use the map to try and identify where are your opportunities for either taking advantage of those commoditized things or where things might change in the near future. For example, if you got the feedback processing service and you're writing this and you're processing data out of a survey, it wouldn't blow my mind if those survey platforms then started to extend their services to say, and at the end of this survey, we will collect all the results together and do sentiment analysis for you. So if you were to look at this project, you might not decide, oh, I want to invest enough in this project to turn it into a product, and then that'll be things we offer our customers, because there could be people working those things that are already offering that as a commoditized service. So it'll help you make some of the decisions about where you want to invest your time and money. And really importantly, discuss the map with other people in your business. You can't really go off into a room and come out with this and go, ta-da, I've got this graph full of dependencies and things. Now you're working on containers and you're working on data storage and you're working on that. It's not really that great to do it by yourself, because you learn a lot more about having the arguments over where does this thing sit in commoditized versus custom build. How much additional customer-specific work are we actually adding on top of this? Having these discussions with people will let you kind of identify a bit more of where they actually live in that kind of technology evolution and what other things we might have missed that are needed to meet that user need, or what other options we have. So I talked a little bit about that. That lets you kind of help illustrate how you're going to make some of the decisions you're going to make, and then can give you questions that you want to ask about your strategy. So if we're going to build this component and we're going to outsource this component, what happens whenever we can outsource all of these other things? You've got a way to actually help you illustrate those decisions and help discuss them with people in the company to try and, it's like I said at the start, showing you're working whenever you're talking about your strategy. It doesn't just come out of thin air. You can tie it back to something. So where to from here, once you've got this? Well, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. I think it was George Box, a statistician, said that. So the point of your map, the point of breaking that user need into those components isn't to be perfectly right. It's about to start those conversations with the people that you can actually help understand the user need, and that you can help understand why we're proposing a specific kind of course of action. And I definitely recommend trying this out. So try this out either for a project, for something that you're doing in your business, or if you're an executive or you're running a startup, try and do this to try and map out how you're meeting your particular user needs with your product. Try and see if it's something that's useful to you. And you can read some more of Simon Wardley's work for patterns to apply, different approaches to try and work around blockers, try and accelerate the evolution of certain things, which is quite interesting. Highly recommend it. He's written a book on Wardley Maps, and it's all up on Medium. It's on medium.com/Wardley Maps, and it's all, he's done it for free, which is quite nice. So overall, Wardley Maps are designed to give you a systemic approach to strategy, something that's a bit justified and intelligible, and that you can kind of show people then how you're making these decisions. And then visualizing the context and showing how you've actually broken down this particular user need, you can see maybe how different things that you're involving to meet that user need could actually change and might change in the future. And hopefully it'll let you make better and kind of more justified decisions. Thanks.